Let's take a little time to reveal the prehistoric stories that the earth once concealed. Mix them all together on this ancient land. It's time to spread some Palaeo Jam. Hello, welcome to the next edition of Palaeo Jam. My name is Michael Mills and I'm your host for today. And for much of today's episode, we're going to talk about a very particular and fascinating creature called Koolasuchus cleelandi. And via the courtesy of Zoom, I have Mike Cleland. G'day, Mike.
G'day, Michael.
And Lesley Kool. Hi, Lesley.
Good morning, Michael.
And you'll notice that their names seem to be connected in some way to this particular creature, and we'll talk about what Koolasuchus is in a short while. But let's go back to the beginning. And Lesley, I want to start with you. Quite a few years ago, 1983, I wasn't quite in nappies, but I was. Tom Rich, who was curator of the vertebrate paleontology at the Museums of Victoria, called for volunteers to help on a dinosaur dig in the Otways. And you put your hand up for that.
I did indeed.
What was it? What was it in your life at that moment that made you go, oh, I want to do that?
Well, I've always been interested in history, past history, particularly archaeology. But that's when I lived in England. When we moved to Australia, I decided I'd like to go to university and study geology, but at that time I had a young family. And so I joined the Friends of the Museum and became involved as a volunteer. And that's when Tom sent out the invitation to the Friends if anyone wanted to go along. So I decided it was something I'd really like to do. And 1984, February, I went down there for 2 weeks and it changed my life.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, isn't it? You see these moments, yeah. You've not seen the call out. You know,
yes,
just those little moments can change lives. And you know, the rest is history, as they say, and we'll come to a fair bit of that. Fast forward a few years, Mike, you were out for a stroll one day and you came across a bit of bone that became later known as Koolasuchus. What got you to that place, to being there, and were you looking for things at the time?
Yes, I was, because Lesley Kool had shown me where to look and what to look for. So to step back a few months, I think it was, I first met Lesley in January of 1990, and we were, what was it, 89? Yeah, 1989. And we were prospecting at Marengo, which is near Apollo Bay down the west coast in Victoria. And so Lesley took us out on this prospecting tour, and she had a demonstration bone. She had a piece of bone in a piece of rock about the size of a house brick, and she showed me this thing, and she said, "Can you see the bone?" And I said, "No." And then she held it up in front of my face, and she said, "Can you see it now?" And I said, "No." And then she sort of pointed it out to me, and then now I know what you're looking at. Okay, so that's a bone. So that and a few other things gave me the general idea of what to look for. So coming home from that week spent down the west coast at Dinosaur Cove with Lesley and the team, I then came back to the Bass Coast where I live and started looking around in this area and started finding things, because the area hadn't been looked at for quite some time. And then fortuitously on the 30th of May, I was making my way through a place called Rowell's Beach and came across this thing sticking out of the rock, which I literally thought was a tree. I'd never seen a bone that big. I thought it was a branch of a piece of petrified wood. And it wasn't until I literally got down on my hands and knees with the hand lens and had a close look at it that I could actually see the labyrinthine infolding of the teeth exposed in cross section. And in that way, I was able to convince myself that this really was a jawbone with teeth sticking out of it.
Yeah, certainly not a tree with teeth. Certainly. Is that and that moment when you suddenly realized, and in a sense, almost like Lesley's moment of going, oh, I want to go on that thing. Life can turn on moments, can't it? What was that moment when you suddenly realized, without knowing exactly what it is and all that was to follow, you suddenly realized, oh, this was an animal.
Right, yeah, that's the feeling. It was hard to describe. It's a shock, it's a thrill, it's exhilarating, exciting, yeah, I knew it was going to be something big. This was the biggest bone that had ever been seen in this area, and the best exposed jawbone that had hitherto come to light. So yeah, I knew it was something that had potential, but it wasn't until Lesley's ongoing work with preparation fully exposed the jawbone and the teeth and the other jawbone, which was found beside it, or partially. So yeah, we knew it. But to be honest, Michael, I didn't think Koolasuchus was going to go global. I mean, even as we learnt more about it, I still thought that nobody's going to take these animals seriously. It's just a cold-blooded, mud-grubbing, slimy-skinned, bottom-dwelling amphibian from the early Cretaceous that only its mother could love it. It's now the fossil emblem of Victoria, and kids have pictures of it on their bedroom walls. I didn't.
Yeah,
no, really.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I want to take a step back because we started with Lesley in 1983, 84, and then come 1990, Mike is coming to you. So obviously you've done a bit in those few years. What's always interesting, and the first fossil dig I ever went on, it was at Emu Bay in Kangaroo Island, and I got there and the paleos there said, right, here's your tools, go sit over there, start looking for things. I'm like, what? And it's that thing of and I think you kind of hinted at it too, Mike, but when I talked to Lesley a bit about it, you get your eye in, don't you?
You do. That's a very good expression. Yep.
You get your eye in, and it helps you to be able to identify. It's like if somebody says, oh, if somebody buys a red car, all of a sudden all the cars seem to be red.
Yes, that's right. And as Mike pointed out, when we first met back in 1989, I mean, he'd lived on Phillip Island all his life, and having a geological background, he had spent a lot of time looking at the rocks around Phillip Island, along the Bass Coast, but had never spotted a bone. And it was because, as you said, he didn't have his eye in. And so that week that we spent prospecting along the Otways, Mike did get his eye in, and when he returned to the Bass Coast, it's amazing the number of fossils he found so quickly after that.
And probably things that you would have walked by over the years, Mike.
Definitely, yeah. Prior to meeting Lesley, I had spent a fair bit of time on the lower Cretaceous exposures along the coastline there, at the Punch Bowl and various other places around San Remo, because I knew from geology that there should have been dinosaurs there. I knew about the Cape Patterson claw, so I reckoned I had a chance of finding something, but I really didn't know what to look for. I was finding bits of coal, and I brought stuff into the museum that turned out not to be fossils. So yeah, it took a while to find my feet, but the day it changed was the first day I spent prospecting with Lesley, when I got to see some genuine bones and got assistance with identification.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We've got two life-changing moments and days and things in that. Lesley, so what had your role become that you were standing there in front of Mike, a young whippersnapper, Mike Cleland at the time, teaching him how to get his eye in? What was your role by that time? After
the inaugural Dinosaur Cove dig in 1984, I think we returned. It was a 2-week dig. We returned with about 100 fossils, and there was no one to prepare them. So I put my hand up and said, I'd like to learn how to prepare. I got a quick lesson from a couple of people at the museum. And like you, there you go, there's your tool, go ahead. And I guess it was a matter of learning by experience. But by when I met Mike by 1989, I had, a number of years of preparation under my belt. I knew what fossils looked like. And on that field trip, most of the crew was working down at Dinosaur Cove, but Tom Rich from Museums Victoria, he wanted to see if there were any other fossil localities close to Dinosaur Cove, and so I was given the task of taking a group of people down and firstly showing them what the fossils looked like and then finding more. And of course, during that time, we did find more, but nothing like that was turning out at Dinosaur Cove.
Yeah, so I want to now start talking a little bit about this particular critter, Koolasuchus. I was looking at the museum's Victoria website, and there's a description which I'll read out, and it says, in a head the size of a dustbin lid, were dozens of ridged fangs for piercing prey and 2-inch tusks growing from the roof of its mouth. Resembling something between a huge newt and a crocodile, Koolasuchus was adapted to life in the rushing rivers that once separated Australia and Antarctica. It's a pretty cool description and a pretty cool animal.
It is.
What to each of you, and maybe go to you first, Mike, what if you were back in this Rift Valley, which I understand was what it was like. There was a Rift Valley back then, and you came across Koolasuchus. What would you see? Yeah,
I think the first thing that would strike you is the head. It's got this ridiculous flat pancake head that sticks out the side and totally out of proportion to the rest of the body. That makes it unmistakable. It's been described as having a head like a toilet seat. And so I think that's the first thing. The next thing you might note would be the sprawling gait. So it has a gait more like a crocodile than a dinosaur. But yeah, I think it's the head, the ornamentation on the head, and if it opened its mouth and growled at you, you'd step backwards pretty smartly.
and because it's an amphibian, it's a Pemdaspondal.
That's right. Correct.
And what's unique about it, and maybe Lesley, you can talk to this a bit, it was the last of its kind.
Yeah, well, as far as I know,
that we know of.
Yeah, exactly. There's been no younger Temnospondyle found anywhere in the world. So basically, Koolasuchus was the last. There's a paper written by Anne Warren, which is called the last labyrinthodont, because originally the one before that was called the last labyrinthodont, which was Steropodon. No, is it Steropodon?
Siderops?
No, Siderops. Sorry, beg your pardon. Siderops from New South Wales was allegedly thought to be the youngest until, of course, Koolasuchus turned up. So the last labyrinthodont, the next paper was the last labyrinthodont, and as far as I know, that is still the case today. It's the last one existing in the world,
and by quite a significant period of time. I know when it was discovered, it was like we were talking millions and millions and millions of years, and there may have been some others more recently.
50 million, I think. About 50 million between Siderops and Koolasuchus.
That's a long time.
It is. I think it says something about the unique situation down along the south coast of Australia, or Victoria at least, where there were remnant animals and also evidence of animals that were the first of their kind, like the ceratopsians. And it's certainly a very unique environment.
Yeah. So Mike, what does Koolasuchus tell us about prehistoric Victoria?
It tells us that there was something different going on there. And within a quite restricted range, most of the Koolasuchus fossils, the type specimen and other bones subsequently discovered, including the gok, which Tim Flannery found, are confined to a narrow geographical range between San Remo and the point west of Kilcunda. There's a smattering of bones outside that, but there's some environmental factor which we still perhaps don't fully understand, which was governing the paleobiology of that area, which has led to a concentration of Koolasuchus in that narrow area. They may have been more widely distributed. We don't have evidence of that, but it's probably either got to do with the climate or the landscape or both that has singled out that area.
Yeah, and one of the cool things about the area, I guess, is that there's lots of different things, isn't there? There's you're finding dinosaurs like Lesley Arctic polar dinosaurs, Antarctic polar dinosaurs. You're finding mammals as well, prehistoric mammals.
Yeah, there's at least 5 different types of mammals associated with the dinosaurs, but they tend to be further to the east of San Remo, around Inverloch. Although, having said that, just in the last few years, I think 2 mammals have been found over in the Otways at close to Eric the Red. But yeah, it's the diversity which is really interesting, considering how extreme the environment must have been, being in the polar circumpolar area, where they would have experienced between 6 and 8 weeks of darkness each polar winter, and conversely 6 to 8 weeks of daylight in the summer. But even in the summer, it wouldn't have gotten anywhere near as warm as it is today, because of course we have to realize that Australia was much further south than it is today. Today, Melbourne is around 38 degrees south, but 125 million years ago, when Koolasuchus was around, Australia was still attached to Antarctica and was around, between 75 and 80 degrees south. So it was a much more extreme environment than today.
So, Mike, you're back in the Cretaceous. You're strolling along. You've seen Koolasuchus, which is what, 3 to 4 meters long?
Yeah, about that.
That is a very large newt, isn't it?
Right.
Killer frog.
Killer
frog, as Dave Pickering described.
Yeah. So you're walking along the coast that you walked along where you found Koolasuchus, but it's over 100 million years ago. What was it like? What are you looking around and seeing?
You'd be looking around warily, because there's large theropod dinosaurs known to be in the area, which may or not be something very closely related to Australovenator. So you've got Australovenator on one side on the dry land area, and you've got Koolasuchus in the river. So you'd probably be having an attitude similar to what you would have in North Queensland rainforests, where you've got crocodiles along the shoreline and cassowaries in the jungle. So yeah, you'd want to be pretty well protected in an environment like that. The main defence and the main difference is that Koolasuchus probably could not run you down. If you were a safe distance from a water body and a Koolasuchus came at you, its legs would probably not be strong enough to gallop after you the way crocodiles can. So you've got that kind of luck on your side. But in the water, you wouldn't take it on.
So in terms of how Koolasuchus lived its life, from what we were able to determine from the fossils, how did it hunt? Would it have been like that ambush thing that crocs do?
Yeah, maybe I can say.
Yeah.
A recent theory that's been proposed is that Koolasuchus may have been a suction feeder. That is, that instead of going around chasing things and biting them like crocodiles do, Koolasuchus might have just sat there until something swam past, and then gone and opened its big mouth and literally sucked things in and then chomped down and swallow it. Because that's a scenario that's likely given the shape of its head, and given the fact that salamanders do the same thing, which are with a roughly similar head. Another possibility is that it had sensory nerves. Koolasuchus and the other temnospondyls are distinguished by having these ridges and grooves on the jawbone, on the skull, on the sternum, and there's a suggestion that there are sensory nerves going through there, so that in an aquatic environment, if a fish some meters away wriggles its tail, those vibrations come through the water, it can actually feel it. So there's a couple of hunting strategies that Koolasuchus may have employed.
Oh, so fast forward a few years after it's gone global and people have come to understand this remarkable creature. Victoria went through a process to decide on a fossil emblem. Here in South Australia, ours is Sprigina. Western Australia, I think, was first with the go-go fish. New South Wales have a fish that no one ever remembers what it is. Sorry, New South Wales, you could have gone lightning claw or something. Anyway, I'm just saying you could have got. Queensland now has Muttaburrasaurus. ACT have a trilobite. I think that's also far. Northern Territory are going through the process. I think Tasmania are thinking about it, and so are New Zealand. For Victoria, you threw quite a fabulous collection of contenders, from Lesley to a giant bird with a 6-meter wingspan, Palacastes, this weird marsupial, and Koolasuchus came through with winning colours.
We did. It was a great honour.
So why Koolasuchus? Why do you reckon? And I get an answer from each of you. You first, Lesley. Why do you think people went, yeah, that thing there, of all of these remarkable fossils from Victoria?
Well, I think it might have something to do with the name. I think people sort of just think, oh, that's cool. And I think that had a lot to do with it, apart from the fact that it was just such a weird animal. And, with its flip-top head and the huge teeth. I think the name might have had something to do with it.
Yeah. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I agree with Lesley, and I also add a bit of background that I have, as you know, something over 2,000 friends on Facebook, and I actually bribed them all to vote for Koolasuchus. I promised them a free field trip to the site of the discovery, to the type locality, if Koolasuchus won. So I've actually taken a few people to that to reward them for their loyalty. But yeah, I tend to agree with Lesley that there's something iconic about this thing. There is nothing quite like that size and proportions, that head, and the fact that its name is actually cool.
Yeah, and it is, and I think one of the, for me, what strikes me, and all of the, my second favorite is Lesley because of what it tells us about dinosaurs living in polar regions, and my third is probably Palacastes because it's just a weird marsupial. But I if I was in Victoria, I would have voted. And we're Facebook friends, Mike. I'll still take you up on the offer, even though I couldn't vote, probably. I don't know. Anyway, but I think Koolasuchus is an absolutely worthy winner because it was the last of its kind, because it helps, I guess, as you both talked about, it helps give us a sense of what it was like to walk through this ecosystem. And it's not just about dinosaurs, as cool, to use a much used word in this podcast, as much as dinosaurs are cool. It's this thing that's different.
Exactly. That's right. And I think you're right. It's the diversity of this environment that Koolasuchus lived in that is it's just so amazing to think that so many animals could have survived under those extreme conditions. And we've still literally, and I know it's a paraphrase, but we've literally just scratched the surface as far as finding more evidence of what these animals were like. And with Mike and his team, who are continuously prospecting along the Basque Coast, and because of the continuous erosion, new bones are being exposed all the time. So, it's really exciting to think about what else is going to turn up in the next few years.
That's correct, Lesley. That's one of the things that keeps us going. When I first started in this and found Koolasuchus and a few other things, I thought it might be 5 or 10 years and we will have found everything that's there to be found. In fact, the opposite is happening. The pace of discovery is continuing to ramp up as we get new people on board, in particular Melissa, other people extending into the Otways, footprints are popping up. So exciting times ahead, and I think this is going to be a particularly good year for announcement of new discoveries. We've got research papers in the pipeline that will hopefully be published this year, so that's not all over for Koolasuchus. One other point I'd like to make about the naming of it is that Koolasuchus is a rather clever play on words. I think it was chosen by Tom Rich, and it's a bit of a double meaning. The cool bit refers to Lesley Kool, of course, who did a huge amount of work on the preparation of the original specimens. All I did was found them and helped to cut them out, and Lesley did 95% of the work. So it's cool. It also refers to a cool climate, because at that time we were still up against Antarctica and within the Antarctic Circle, so it was quite a bit cooler than it is now. So I think people relate to that once they understand that kind of double meaning of the Koolasuchus. That's another added factor that makes it worth voting for as Victoria's fossil emblem.
Absolutely. All right, we've got about 4 minutes left. How time flies. This is crazy. Mike, you've been lobbying to create a dinosaur trail along the area's coastline, and having a fossil emblem, kind of this whole narrative, and some of the stuff that I do as my alter ego is very much about helping people connect to their local prehistoric story or to our national prehistoric stories. And again, ask both of you first, Mike, why is having a fossil emblem important, and why do you think learning about our prehistoric stories, why does it matter? Why should we care?
Oh, to me, it's just community education. It's getting basic science out there into the community, both for adults and children. One of the things that bothers me is I recently read that apparently in America, fully 40% of the population believes it's either true or likely to be true that humans and dinosaurs coexisted together. 15% of them believe it's true, and 25% is likely to be true. I'm not sure what the percentage is in Australia. It could be something near that. So my attitude is just, let's get the basics right. Let's get the information out into the community. Let's make it readily accessible and enjoyable. So, yeah, we're going to have a dinosaur trail extending from San Remo to Inverloch. So there's going to be a Koolasuchus at San Remo, a Serendipiceratops at Kilcunda, Quantosaurus at Inverloch. And so you'll be able to travel from one dinosaur to the next and learn as you go. So we're just about completed the design for that now. It's now at the stage of seeking state and federal funding, and hopefully in the not too distant future it'll be up and going.
Fantastic. Lesley, why do you think these things matter? Learning about fossil heritage. Why should we care?
Well, particularly here in Victoria, we've been digging dinosaurs for the last 40 years. And yet very little is known by the public, even though there are a number of books that Pat and Tom Rich have written. And there's been, every time we have a dinosaur dig, the local community and the media come out. But it's amazing how many people just didn't realise or don't realise that dinosaurs actually existed in Victoria and Australia as a whole. So this dinosaur trail, I'm hoping, will certainly highlight the work that has been done, particularly in the Bass Coast over the last 30 years, and will make people aware that there are ancient Australian animals that lived, and most people don't know anything about them.
Yeah, and I guess part of the awesome part of it too is that, when you're walking that or driving the dinosaur trail, you're walking in the footsteps of these creatures.
Literally, yes, that's right. With all the dinosaur tracks that have been found just in the last 2 or 3 years, both along the Bass Coast and on the Otway Coast, these are actual physical evidence of where an animal, a dinosaur, trod and left the impression of its feet. So you are literally standing or walking in the footprints of dinosaurs.
All right, I will let you two go and have a cup of tea, and I'm going to go for my morning walk.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you again, Michael. It was fun.
Absolute pleasure. Talk soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
See you guys. Bye. It's time to spread some Palaeo Jam.